Hi friends! For the longest time, I've wanted to paint forest and fog. There's just something about that image, the quiet, the stillness, the way the trees disappear into the mist. But every time I tried to put it on paper, it just didn't work. I'd sketch it out, start painting, and then halfway through I'd stop and think, this isn't it. This isn't what I wanted. And I'd shove it aside and tell myself I'd try it again later. Honestly, it started to feel like I was chasing something I couldn't reach. And no matter how hard I tried, it felt like the work is not good enough. Eddie, can I cut my paper? I actually recorded how I painted this piece but didn't publish it at first, thinking maybe there would be the time when it all would come together. When I feel this way, when I doubt my creativity, I often turn to reading. Reading often helps me clear my mind and provides guidance. One such book is The Art Spirit, first published in 1923, is more than just a book. It's a timeless guide for artists navigating the complexities of creativity and self-expression. Written by Robert Henri, a renowned painter and teacher. It's a collection of his lectures, critiques, and philosophies on art and life. An artist has got to get acquainted with himself just as much as he can. It is not an easy job, for it is not a present-day habit of humanity. This is what I call self-development, self-education. Find out what you really like if you can. Find out what is really important to you, then sing a song. You will have something to sing about and your whole heart will be in the singing. When a man is full up with what he's talking about, he handles such language as he has with a mastery unusual to him. And it is at such times that he learns language. These words remind me that art isn't about perfection. It's about connection. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that your work becomes an extension of who you are. And sometimes that means stepping back, reflecting, and giving yourself permission to grow. And after stepping away from this work for a while, I came back with fresh eyes and realized something. I am so grateful I kept that recording. It reminded me that even in moments of doubt, there is value in the process itself, in showing up and creating, even when it's messy or uncertain. Today I want to share that journey with you, not just the painting, but the doubts, the missteps, and how we can overcome those moments together. You saw me loosely sketch the trees, and now I've started applying the first wash on this piece of 300-pound cold-press watercolor paper. I initially pre-wetted the surface to help the colors flow more freely, but as I look back at this video, I realized something. I was probably too free in my color application. That happens to me a lot when I'm experimenting, especially with my old 47 color palette. At this time, I didn't think much about my palette beforehand, and looking at it now, I can see how the lack of planning made this first layer feel heavier than I wanted. The colors don't quite harmonize the way I'd hoped, and that's one of the challenges of working with such a large palette. It's easy to get carried away and lose focus. And it looks like after all the years of learning to paint in watercolor, I'm being reminded again and again that limiting my colors can actually be freeing. A smaller palette forces you to think more intentionally about your choices and how they interact. For example, starting with just a few warm and cool primary colors can give you a wide range of mixing possibilities without overwhelming you. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just letting the paint flow. And while there is a value in that kind of freedom, it also taught me an important lesson. Sometimes thinking through my palette is just as important as my spontaneity. For the first wash, I chose a soft palette, a yellow ochre, Dave's gray, and touches of cerulean blue. These colors felt like a good starting point to capture the muted, atmospheric quality of the foggy sky. As I worked my way down to depicting the distant trees wet on wet, I began mixing in darker values using French Ultramarine and Payne's Gray. To add a bit of variation to the forest color and break up the monotony, I decided to include just a hint of opera pink. It's not a color you typically associate with a foggy forest, but sometimes those unexpected pops of color can bring life to an otherwise subdued palette. It's one of those small risks that can either elevate a piece or throw it off balance, but in this case I think it added something subtle yet interesting. And another positive thing about this experience that I can think of was that I approached it without any restraints, without worrying too much about what would happen when I mix so many colors together. That freedom allowed me to experiment and, more importantly, to learn. I discovered so much about how each color behaves on its own and in combination with others. For example, Dave's gray really surprised me. It's such a subtle greenish gray tone, and I found it to be incredibly versatile. It doesn't overpower other colors, but instead blends in beautifully to create a sense of melancholy and calm. It has this organic quality that feels perfect for overcast scenes or moody forest landscapes. I'm already thinking about how I can use it more intentionally in future paintings, especially when I want to capture that quiet, reflective atmosphere. This process reminded me that even when a piece doesn't turn out exactly as planned, there's always something valuable to take away. To believe that with every painting I learn something valuable about the materials I use, the techniques I try, and even about myself. The doubts, on the other hand, are always present and there is no going away from them. I think that something I need to hear more often is that it's okay to doubt your work. It's okay to feel like I'm not sure where it's going or if it's even worth finishing. Those moments of uncertainty, they don't mean I'm a bad artist. They just mean I'm a human. I think that when we are working on a piece, we sometimes ask ourselves, why does it feel so hard? Why can't I get it right? And the truth is, sometimes we're too close to our own works to see them clearly. We focus so much on what we think is wrong that we forget to notice what's working, or even just appreciate the fact that we showed up and tried. That's why I'm so grateful for this community. When I shared my doubts with you, you reminded me that the process matters just as much as the outcome, maybe even more. You reminded me that creating art for this channel isn't about perfection, it's about our growth and connection with each other. And that support means everything because it helps me keep going, even when I feel stuck. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like giving up on a piece, I want you to know that you are not alone. We all have those days when nothing seems to work, when the colors feel muddy or the ideas don't come together, but those moments don't define you as an artist. What defines you is how you keep showing up anyway, how you keep picking up the brush or the pen or whatever it is you use to create. For me, this painting became less about getting the foggy forest exactly right and more about learning to trust the process. It taught me that even when a piece doesn't turn out how I imagined, there's still something valuable in it. It could simply be just the act of pushing through my doubts. And maybe that's what creativity is really about, finding beauty in the mess, in the uncertainty, in the moments when things don't go as planned. As I reflect on this piece, I realize something important. The doubts I felt while working on it weren't a sign that I was failing. They were a sign that I was growing. Doubt is uncomfortable, yes, but it's also necessary. It's part of the process of pushing ourselves as artists, of stepping into the unknown and trying to create something meaningful. And while it doesn't feel good in the moment, I've learned that embracing those feelings is what allows me to move forward. One thing that helped me is reframing how I see the work I don't like. It's easy to look at a painting or a sketch and think, this is not working. But instead of seeing those pieces as failures, I try to view them as stepping stones, each one teaching me something new. With this painting, for example, I learned so much about how colors interact on wet paper and how certain tones like Dave's gray can evoke a specific mood. Those lessons are invaluable, even if the final piece isn't exactly what I envisioned. And here's the thing, the doubts never fully go away. They'll always be there, whispering in the background. But what I've come to understand is that they don't have to stop us. Instead, we can acknowledge them, even thank them for reminding us that we're changing ourselves, and then keep going anyway. One passage from The Art Spirit by Robert Henri has stayed with me after I read his book. He writes, "Don't worry about your originality. You couldn't get rid of it even if you wanted to. It will stick with you and show up for better or worse in spite of all you or anyone else can do." When I read that, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. So often we get caught up in trying to make something perfect or worthy, when really our job as artists is just to show up and express what's inside us, to paint what feels right and true to us. Henri reminds us that art isn't about impressing others, it's about connection, both with ourselves and with the world around us. So if you're struggling with doubts right now, if you're looking at your work and feeling like it's not good enough, I want you to know that you're not alone. We all feel that way sometimes, but those doubts don't define you as an artist. Your willingness to keep creating does. One strategy that helps me when I doubt myself is taking a step back, not just from my work, but from my expectations of myself. Sometimes that means taking a break entirely or exploring other forms of creativity, like reading or journaling. And finally, please don't be afraid to lean on your community when you need support. Sharing my struggles with all of you has reminded me that we are never truly alone. Your encouragement gives me strength to keep going, and I hope this video can do the same for you. Thank you, and until next time.